All right, class. Today we're going to look at the second lesson in chapter 6, one-step multiplication and division equations, multiply or divide equations. Very similar to the lesson from yesterday. Uh, and so it's just instead of adding and subtracting, it's going to be multiplication and division. So again, remember what we talked about yesterday? We talked about the idea of inverse operations, and it's going to be true again today. This one's really important to know what is happening so that you can undo it. I think what I see year to year is people understand what is happening, and so they don't know what to do. But again, if you know what's happening, you can undo it. And again, yesterday we used the example of putting on your shoe and taking off your shoe, right? If you understand that you put your shoe on, then you will understand that you need to take your shoe off. Like that's basically how we're going to do these problems. So let's go ahead and just dive right on into these problems since they're very similar and we'll know what to do here. Okay, so let's start with one step multiplication. And they're called one-step equations because there's just one step and then you're done. Okay, so one step and then you are done. So let's start with one that looks like this. Let's say 6x is equal to 30. Okay, so if you remember from yesterday, from lesson 6.1, we want to do these the exact same way that we did the other ones before. First step, draw that wall. Okay, now here's a part that a lot of people don't understand, has still a problem understanding, is we find the variable, which we know is x. Here it is. So we know we're going to work with the left side. Okay. You have to understand that 6x is multiplication. All right. I'll just write that off to the side. You don't have to copy that down. But remember that 6x is the same thing as 6 times x. Okay. 6 times x. It's multiplication. That's what's happening. What is happening is multiplication. So what you need to do is the inverse of multiplication. And what is the inverse of multiplication? Well, division. Division, of course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by the number that's right there. It's not tricky at all. You just divide by the exact same number, right? Divide by 6. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide by 6 on both sides. Remember, what you do on one side, you have to do to the other. So you're going to divide by 6 on both sides. Now, what does this do? Yesterday, we canceled things out because it made it to 0, so you didn't have to write it. Technically, that doesn't work the same, but very similar. 6 divided by 6, we know, is 1. So you get 1x. But remember, you don't really have to write the 1, so you simply can just write it as x. So really, it does kind of just cancel out, and think of it that way, as you just end up with the x by itself. And then on the other side, we have 30 divided by 6, which is 5. So the answer that I think I have is x is equal to 5. Again, we talked about yesterday a little bit. This is what we call the solution. X equals 5 is the solution. Okay, so here is that's our vocabulary from yesterday. X equals 5 is the solution so far. But remember, we always have to double check. We always have to double check our work to make sure that it works out. So let's do our check over here, just over to the right. So again, you plug in the number. So we have 6, and then we said that x is equal to 5. So I'm going to put 5 instead of x here. Sorry, let me do it. Let me put in the equation first. So I have 6 times x equals 30, which is 6. And then instead of x, I'm going to put the number 5. And we know that 6 times 5 is 30. So 30 is equal to 30. So that checks out. I can say with confidence that that is my answer. X is equal to 5. So again, the most important thing is that you understand that 6 times x right here is what we're talking about is multiplication, right? If you understand that it's multiplication, then you know how to undo it, which is division. Okay? All right, and I know this is going a little bit slower. Some of you guys are like, Mr. Leong, I can just do that in my head, and it's real simple, and I can just do that. I understand that. But like I said yesterday, things will get harder And there's going to be things where we have both adding and multiplication, or subtracting and division. And so we need to be able to keep things, on track and kind of make it as simple as we can. Okay, let's do another one here. How about this one? 24 is equal to negative 8y. All right, now this problem, actually, people get really confused. They see the negative 8 and they think about yesterday's lesson and they say, I got it, Mr. Leong. I know what to do. I'm going to draw my wall. And then the way that I get rid of a negative 8 is I add 8, just like this. This is what I see all the time. Now, there's a problem there. All right, what's the problem? Well, that doesn't actually cancel anything, because you have to remember, this is multiplication. This is negative 8 times y, okay? Not negative 8 minus y. So there's a difference, right? Let me just show you again. You don't have to write this part down. But what you're thinking of, if you do it this way, is you're thinking of this. If you had this problem, then yes, you would add 8 on both sides. You guys see the difference? This one is subtraction, so we add. This one is multiplication. So what should we do? We shouldn't add 8. We should instead divide by negative 8. Negative 8. And that's the other part that's tricky too, is understanding that you have to divide by exactly this number. So it should be a negative 8. So a lot of people make mistakes on that one too. Okay. So because we're multiplying, we actually need to divide. You guys see the difference between these two problems here? This problem right here that I'm going to circle in the green, this is what we did yesterday. What we're doing today is, instead of multiplication, we're going to divide. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to divide by negative 8. So 24 divided by 8 is 3, but it's a negative 8, so it should be a negative 3. We know that the negative 8 and the negative 8 here cancel, so you're left with just y. So y is equal to negative 3. So again, it's really important that you don't get caught up with that negative 8. Is it adding? Is it subtracting? No, it's multiplication. When it's just a number right next to the variable, it's multiplication. Okay? All right, so let's check it like we always do. Let's do my check right here underneath. 24 is equal to negative 8y, but instead of y, I'm going to put negative 3. So is 24 equal to negative 8 times negative 3? Yes, it is, right? That's positive. Negative times negative is positive. So that checks out. So I can say with confidence that is my final answer. So these ones actually get a little bit complicated. So let's go over another one that's just like this. Okay. So you should be able to do this one on your own. Go ahead and do that. Again, what I would do here is I would draw my wall. And then I find the variable. So again, the variable is a. It's on the left side. So I know I'm not dealing with the 36 at all. I'm dealing with the negative 6. I see that as negative 6 times a. I'm going to write, the other way you can write division is a line, kind of like a fraction. That means division. Divide on both sides. Divide by negative 6. Divide by negative 6 on both sides, right? So we see what cancels out. Okay, negative 6 and negative 6 cancel, so I'm left with just a equals negative 36 divided by negative 6 is a positive 6. So let's do the check work over here. Negative 6a equals negative 36. I'm going to plug in, instead of a, I'm going to plug in what I think our answer is, which is 6. Let's see if that works out. Negative 6 times 6 is in fact negative 36. And so there you go. There you have your check answer. And that's what we're trying to do there. All right, so these are the multiplication problems. So they're multiplication. I call them multiplication because you see multiplication, but you're actually going to divide, right? That's what you're actually going to try and do, is you're going to try and divide. So you see multiplication, you do the inverse, which is divide. So next we're going to talk about, what about division equations? All right, so now we're going to talk about division equations. All right, and again, very similar, except you have to understand what division looks like. And there's a couple different ways that you'll see division, but mainly you'll see it with in kind of the fraction way. So it's going to look like this. Okay, so y over negative 3 is equal to negative 8. So something divided by negative 3 is equal to negative 8. And again, you have to understand what is happening. So the first thing I'll do, draw my wall so I know there's two sides. And I'm going to say, okay, well, I know I'm dealing with a y. I want to look at the variable, which is y. So I see what's going on with the y. Why isn't the y by itself? Because it has this negative 3 underneath it. Now, again, we talked about just now that the fraction bar is division. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the opposite of that, the inverse, which is to multiply by negative 3 to both sides. Okay, I see that's division by, so I'm going to multiply by negative 3 here, or you can say negative 3 over 1. That's another way you could do that. So notice when I have a negative 3 on top and a negative 3 on bottom, what happens to these things, right? They're going to cancel out. Negative 3 cancels with negative 3, and all I'm left with is y. I isolated my variable. Negative 8 times negative 3 is a positive 24. So again, let's check it. Let's make sure. We should get a little bit faster at checking now. So let's say 24 over negative 3 should equal negative 8. So I plugged in my negative, my answer here, my 24 to right here. All right, so 24 divided by negative 3 should be negative 8, and that is actually correct. Negative 8 does equal to negative 8. That checks out. I feel confidently I can put a box around that answer. That's what I like to do also, is like when I take I do the problem, I check it, and once I checked it, then I can put a box saying I confirmed it, I've locked it in, my final answer. Let's look at another one of these. Give you guys a chance to go over here. So how about this one? M over 5 is equal to negative 7. So here we go. We can say, okay, well, I see that the m is over on the left side, so that's my variable. And then it's being divided by 5, so I want to do the opposite, which is multiply by 5, or 5 over 1. We see that the 5's cancel out, and all I'm left with on the left side is m. And negative 7 times positive 5, in this case, is negative 35. Let's double check it. So negative 35 divided by 5 should equal negative 7. I know that it does, so that checks out. So you can see what's happening here, okay? So when you look back at the problems that we've done, right, A, B, C, D, E, again, the key is knowing where the variable is and what is happening to it, and then undoing it. The place where people get most confused is, again, looking at a problem like letter B, where they say, oh, I see a negative 8, so I want to add it. That's not the same problem, right? Again, if you see a number right next to a variable, that is multiplication, and you need to divide. So just like on letter A here, we'll kind of go back. We see that we had a 6 times x, so we divided by 6. On this one, letter B, we had negative 8 times y, so we divided by negative 8. When we see multiplication, we need to divide. Same thing with letter C. The other thing is also we have to watch out for your negatives. Remember, negatives are always one that give us trouble, so make sure you do your negatives correctly. On the flip side, when you have division, we know the opposite is to multiply. The inverse is to multiply. So again, using the example we've talked about, if you're going to take off your shoe, the opposite is to put your shoe back on, right? That's the idea, okay? So we see that it was dividing by negative 3, so we multiply by negative 3, right? We do that right here on both sides, right? On letter E, same thing. We saw it dividing by 5, so we multiply by 5 on both sides. And you might see division another way on the IXLs. Maybe it uses the division sign, but you should be able to figure out what's going on there, okay? The important thing is that you understand you need to try and get the variable all by itself, isolated. Variables like to be lonely, so they want to be all by themselves. So you got to kick out whatever is bothering them, which is in this case, what's being divided or what's being multiplied. Okay? So that's the whole lesson. Some of you guys will get at that real quick. But again, there's a lot of little things that can kind of mess us up. Again, check your answers, even if it's a little quick check in your head. That's still better than nothing. So that's how you do it. That's how you do multiplication and division equations.